Okay, welcome to the final video. In the last couple of videos, we set the foundation for where we're at now, which is going to be putting things into action, starting to come up with some strategies and tactics for how we're going to grow. Okay, this is the funnest part of the process, but it requires what we did in the other videos. So first we set the foundation of understanding. We went through, ranked our processes, mapped them out. That gave us the understanding of how things work within the company, and it's going to give us a map for later when we want to go ahead and put our plans into action. Then we went ahead and set up data measurement systems where we were collecting data, bringing it into Excel, creating some simple macros that clean up the data and get it ready for what we're about to do next, which is start to analyze the data, group it, build some data visualizations that are going to help us track things and also going to help us with what we're going to do later with our tactics and strategy. So that's what this video is going to be about. So similar to the last video, I'm going to use AI to help run through this. Okay, so now we're over in our AI chat here, and you'll see it's still got the history of the conversation, which is nice because it'll have all the right context already in it. So what we can do now is just pick this up and right where we left off and just say, describe what we want to do next. Basically what I've told it here is essentially look at the customers and total up all of the sales. And one more thing I want to put in here, total amount. It's called total amount. Okay, so I just want to add that in there so it knows exactly where to look. It probably would figure it out, but I wanted to be clear. So all it's going to do is go through the data. It's going to, look at the customer name, and then it's going to, add up all of the sales associated with that customer name. And then what it's going to do is it's going to create a new kind of table to the side, starting at M2 and N2, which is just going to show a customer name and total sales. And that will allow us to essentially do more with it later, but kind of quickly see, what are our customers doing every month. And there are other ways to do this. There always are. Okay, you could do pivot tables and things like that probably just as easily. So why are we doing code for this stuff? Well, because the code is repeatable. Okay, and the pivot tables require some work to set up, and you might need to play with them over time and adjust them. The data might not always line up, etc. So for me, I always try to do things code-based in this because the code can be repeated, it can be flexible, it can do exactly what you need it to do versus, yes, you could do it with a pivot table and other things, but again, we're using the code so that we can create something repeated and automated. Okay, that's why we're doing it. Let's just see what it comes up with because it should probably have an idea of what the data set looks like already. So we're just going to roll with this and see what comes up. If I have problems with it, then maybe I'll load in the data set. Okay, let's take a look. Customer name, column C. Is that right? Yep, that's right. Total sales, column I. New output, yep. Okay, let's look at this. So now we've got last row again, customer as string, total sales as double. That's right. So basically, anytime you see string, that means text. It's going to be text-based, and the customer name certainly is. Double is a type of variable that means it's going to be a number, and total sales are a number, so that's correct. And that matters. You have to, when you set a variable, it has to be the right type so that the code knows what it is. It can't do addition on text. Okay, so you have to, if you give it text and tell it to do addition, it's going to run into errors. So anyway, that's kind of the short answer or short story behind that. But okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to create a dictionary of customers. So what that means is it's a quick way to kind of store a small set, a dictionary that contain all of the customer names in it. Okay, so what it's going to do first is it's going to build this dictionary of customer names. And that's how it's going to know which data goes with which customer. And so it's not going to repeat itself and it's not going to confuse things. So it's a kind of a quick way to say, here's our total set of customer names. And then what it can do is it can reference that dictionary later. So it can just basically say, go to the first item in the dictionary, the first customer name, then go through your data set, find everything that matches, take that sales and add it up. Okay, so it's kind of a streamlined way to do the process. There are other ways to do this in code. You don't have to do this kind of thing with a dictionary, but it's a pretty streamlined way to do it. So that's what it's doing here, dictionary. Yeah, so it's just setting up the dictionary, and then this will have to change again because that's not the actual name of the sheet. So we'll have to pay attention to that. Okay, so first it's finding the last row similar to what it's done before. Now it's going to loop through and group by customer. Okay, so here's the variable customer, which is a string. So it's going to go ahead and pull, see this I in here. And again, 3 means C. So when you're doing code, okay, so notice like if you wanted, there's 2 different ways you can specify columns. You can say like this in quotes A, okay, that's column A, or you can just use a number where 1 corresponds to A, 2 corresponds to B, 3 corresponds to C. So that's it's a little bit easier, but it can be confusing. You know, for example, in something like this, you're trying to go to this cell. Okay, so you've got potentially 2 numbers in here that can be a little confusing. So sometimes you might want to use this notation like it did. Other times you might want to do this where you're saying, okay, this is the row, which is I, because that's changing as we go from 1, 2, 3 as it loops through. And then this is actually the column, but it's 3, but it corresponds to that column C where the customer name lives. And so again, and it's saying it over here, so just for clarification. But again, what this is doing is it's saying, you know, within this worksheet and this cell, pull the value and store it as in this variable. Okay, and same with total sales, but in column 9, which is I. Okay, so all it's doing is it's going row by row, and it's looking at what's the customer name, what's the sales. Okay. Now it's going to update the dictionary here. Okay, so if there exists a customer in the dictionary that has that customer name, so then what we're going to do is essentially add the total sales. So it's going to start to accumulate the total sales for that customer. It's going to add that number to whatever's already there. If there isn't already an existing customer, it's going to add the customer and the total sales. So the first time it runs into a new customer, it's going to run that customer and that total sales. Okay, but if it already exists, then this part doesn't run, this part runs. And what it's going to do is it's going to say, yes, there is an existing customer with an existing sales. Now just add in this total sales that I have. So that's how it's accumulating all those total sales for that one customer. Okay, and so it's doing that for every line that it runs into. It's either adding it and the total sales or just adding the total sales if it already exists. So that's what's going on in the code. And then next I, so then it's going to the next row. Okay, so it's building the dictionary and the sales at the same time there, but that's, again, it's a really streamlined way to do it. And now once that's done, so it's gone through it's gone all the way down to the last row. Now it's going to output, it's going to create the output, okay? It's setting up a new variable, output row, and it's just setting it to 2 because that's where I said I wanted to start it. It's going to clear anything that was in there, which is just like a nice safe way to make sure that you're not, you know, screwing up your data if you had old data in there. So basically it's going to redo it every time, which is fine. You may not want that, but it's just a safe thing for us now. That's fine. Okay, add headers. So now what we're doing here is, it's actually adding in some headers for us. We don't really need that. We could do that on our own. But essentially what that's going to do is before this data starts, it's going to write in text that says customer name and total sales. And then it's going to make them bold. That's fine. We don't really need it to do that. That's extra code. I would probably delete that because I always keep my code extremely simple and to the point because it runs faster that way. So, and each time you do it, you may not want it to write headers. Like this is deleting everything, then rewriting headers every time. That's totally not needed in the future. Like you would want to just keep your headers stagnant because they're not changing, and then just update the data every time. So, going forward, you'd want to change this, but for now it's fine. Okay, so this is the part that matters. This is where we're going to output each customer and total sales. We're setting up a dimension key as a variant for each key in the dictionary. Okay, so what this is saying, it's setting up kind of a temporary variable that just pulls the customer names. Okay, because that's what's in the dictionary. And essentially what it's going to do is it's just going to start printing. So it's going to say output row, which is row 2, and then 13, which is M, 14 is N. Value is going to be set to that key. And so essentially what that's going to do is it's going to go into the dictionary, find the customer name and the total sales, and then just put them in there. So it's kind of like, you could do this more discreetly so that you could actually see it. This is a little bit more of an advanced way to do it. Which is fine. But if you don't understand this, one thing I always like to do is if you don't understand something in the code or you typically like it done another way, then what I would do is at this point I'd prompt it and say, I don't understand that. I don't want to do it that way. I'd prefer if you did it this way or made it more clear. And it'll change it and do that, and it'll work totally fine. I like to do that because when you're troubleshooting at first, it's easier to do it that way where you understand it. And then after you've got it working, you can go back and say, okay, now streamline this code for me. Like how would you make this, really streamlined and tight, and then have it do it and see if it runs the same. And then if it does, then fine. Okay, then maybe you go with a new version. Or then it could be a learning experience where you see how other things are done. Okay, so that's something that I would typically do, but I already understand this, so it's fine. It's fine to go with for now. And then it's just saying next key. So basically it's going through each thing in the each customer name and total sales in the dictionary that we built and just putting it in there. Now, the one thing that I want to, okay, yeah, this was the part that I wanted to make sure. So it is going to the separate rows because you always got to be careful when you set an output row equal to a specific number that it doesn't just keep trying to put things in that row, because that wouldn't make any sense. Well, all it would show would be the last customer if you didn't do it the way that it did it here. If you just said the output row is row 2, what it would do is it would overwrite the data every time. Customer 1 would get put in, then customer 2 would get put in at the same spot, et cetera, et cetera. So only the last customer would end up showing there. But because you're adding 1 each time in the loop, now it's going to go to row 3, row 4, row 5, row 6. So you're going to get a nice table at the end of the day. So that's good that they included that. And then it's got a message box to say, this is what we did. And that's it. So that looks clean. This looks good to go. What I'm going to do now is copy this over, and we're going to create a new macro in the Excel sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, so here we are back over in our spreadsheet, and we're going to set up these macros. Now what I'm going to want to do here is I'm going to use the same macro, but I'm actually going to copy it over a couple of times. And that's because I'm going to want to run it on the April sales, the May sales, and then I'm going to create another sheet that has a combined total of everything. So that what I like to do is I like to do a by month, and then I'll run like a running total where I'll do like year over year stuff. That's always usually really useful too. So we can use the same macro, but we need to do 3 copies of it because it's looking in specific sheets, if you remember the code. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to start at April sales is the name of this one. So again, we're going to go over to our developer tab, Visual Basic. We're going to go to our book 1, right click, insert module, and we're going to paste over that code that we just talked about. And again, this is where we have to be careful here because we're saying April sales, and we actually are going to need to change the name too, because we're going to have 3 different macros, 1 for each. You can't have them be the same, because if you were on May and you clicked run the macro, it would still go back to April. It would go back to whatever it says in the code. There are fancier ways to do this. Like you could probably change the code so that it ran, on every month. You could do, every sheet month, Or, maybe you could put in a box where you're saying this is the month I want run, and then the code just looks in that box to pull the name, then goes to that sheet. So there are ways you can streamline this. Generally, if things are changing, you don't want to put it in code. You want to put it on the front end, and then reference that in your code. So if a name is, even if the name of the sheet is different, like April sales, May sales, that's a change. You want to probably put something on the front end that says, enter the name of the sheet, that you want to run this macro on. And if you just put that text in there on the front end and then hit run macro, now your macro can be just one and run on everything, as long as you're changing the name to what you want it to be. Okay, so there are ways to do it, but that's a general rule of thumb. Anything that's changing frequently, you don't want to put it in the code, because it takes a lot more to go into the code, make the change. Maybe something gets screwed up. Okay, now you're troubleshooting again. So you want your code to be kind of just the part that runs, and anything that changes should be on the front end in the actual workbook, and then just reference that in your code. Just say, go to this cell, pull the value, and then run that in the code. Okay, so that's kind of a good rule of thumb. But for now, I'll call this one April, and then we'll do May, and then probably just a year or something like that. But we already reviewed the code, so we know it's good. I think that's all we need to do for now. And we're going to save it. And then we're going to put this, we're going to put in a button. Okay, now we got to be careful because it's going to output somewhere here. So we can start this over here. I know there's not going to be anything over there. And this is where we have to be careful, because we want just the April. This is April. Okay, that's our thing. So now we're going to say summarize data. Okay, and let's run it. And now we should get the output of customer and total sales. Okay, so simple mistake here. What happened was we have it starting on row 1, and we have text in row 1. So it's telling us that it can't evaluate text because the text isn't a number, which is very true. So because we added in the headers, and the AI chat didn't know that. So we have to start at row 2 here, which is fine. Everything else I think should work after that. So let's go back here, and now it works. And it put in the headers for us. Okay, so now we've got, that should be dollars. Okay, so now we've got our totals here. And just like anything, we should do a quick check here to make sure. Okay, I can't see it again, but let's just copy it and we'll paste it in here. Okay, cool. So for Acme Manufacturing, the totals matched. I'm going to assume that the others will as well. We can check it, but if it did one right, there's a really good chance that it probably did all of them right, and it looks like it is working. Now, if you really wanted to do it, you could go to the last one and check the last one, because if there was going to be errors, it would show up at the end, most likely, where everything would have added up over time in the program. But we're good. We're looking really good here. Okay, so now what we've done here is we've got total sales by month for each customer, which is great, because later we're going to use this to start to formulate some strategies around it. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do same thing here, but for May. So what I need to do is I need to do a new, what I'm going to do is copy this, and I'm going to do a new one. So right click, insert module, and paste. This one's going to be named May. Okay, and then the name we're going to change to May. So now this one's just running for May. Save it. Then on the front, all we need to make sure we do is select the right, we're going to do May, not April. And we're going to say summarize data. And this should work straight away, and it does. Okay, we can check again if we want, but it's so I want to just talk real quick about like when do I stop checking? When do I stop checking that the data is valid or that my code is giving me the right result? When you start to compare your new macros to your existing reports, and if you see that you're getting good matches, meaning like let's say you've got a CRM system that can run total sales by customer by month. Okay, so look at that report in your CRM system and then look at what you're getting. Okay, and if you're getting really consistent matches between your data and your other reports, then I'll know with pretty good certainty that my macros are correct. Okay, so then when I start seeing discrepancies going forward, I'm not checking my code right away. I'm basically, at that point assuming there's something wrong in the data. It's either the CRM system is doing something it shouldn't, or there's incomplete data. But the chances at that point that the code is actually not working is pretty low. So once you get to the point where you're comparing it to other reports in your system, and you're seeing good matches between what you know should be true, then at that point I pretty much stop checking the code, and then I'll look other places first, but come back to the code if obviously it's still not lining up. But I'm just going to change this format also so it's a little bit easier. Okay, so now we've got 2 months. That at least gives us 2 data points, which will be enough to work with. Now what I want to do here is I want to do, let's just call it 2026 because that's what we happen to be working with. So what I want to do with this is, okay, so what I want to do is I want to copy these data sets over. And what I would do is I would do kind of a running total on this. Now, what we have to do also, though, is be careful because we have to add in a month so that we can tell that this was April data. And that just makes it easier in case we want to do, that's not what I want. I want you to copy. Yes. Okay, so this will make it easier for us to do other analysis on it. I mean, technically by doing it this way, you wouldn't even have to run individual months. You could just do it here and then search in this column and pull the month that you want, or pull each month and then show it. Basically kind of reusing the macro that we just did, but on the full yearly data set. And when I mean full yearly data set, what I mean is that you're just taking your data sets for each month and just adding them, like this, and then you just got to be careful and say that this one's May. Okay, and so basically you'd start in January, obviously, and then you would just add in February, March. As you get them, you just keep adding them to the bottom. And that can work as well. And at least that way your data is all in one place. I usually like to break it out per month just so it's easier, because you typically want to come back to specific months and just look at that month. And so it's faster and easier to do it that way. But this has uses as well, which you're going to see now. Because now what I want to do is do the same macro. So let's go over to our Visual Basic, and again we're going to right click, insert module, and we're going to copy paste in. Now I have to find it. There it is. We're going to copy paste this in, and instead of May, what we're going to say is we're just going to say yearly or annual, better. Okay, and then this will need to change. Okay, and everything else should work. So basically what we're doing here is we're going to run a yearly, or kind of a running total for the year, and that's going to be useful for us. So we're going to insert our button here now. Annual, and this is going to be for now. Okay, let's see. Okay, perfect. I got lucky there because I left a space where we put in the month on this one. That almost could have caused problems, but we're fine. So, okay, now we've got enough of a baseline here where we can start to do things. You know, what I typically do when I'm setting up my spreadsheets like this is I will include another sheet up front, and this one, that, okay, and this is where I put all the data visualizations and summaries that I want to do for my data, and the reason I do this is because I want up front a place to go where I know I can quickly see things, okay, and then I can dig into the data if I need to. So like, for example, at this point we could start putting in some tables. You could do lots of things, like you could do line charts and track specific customers over time. That's a good thing to do. Then you can kind of start to see patterns. You can start to see cyclicality and seasonality, so you can see, you know, if you have certain periods through the year where certain customers are ordering more than others. You can start to, you know, it gets really powerful when you start to collect years worth of data, and you can see kind of year over year what's happening, because what you'll find in your accounts is that for the most part they'll be, you know, somewhat stable year over year, maybe with some gentle growth, you know, year over year, and that will really help you figure out if you're seeing a temporary thing in the markets or if you're seeing a bigger problem. You know, what's going on here? Is there a bigger problem? Is it just with you guys? You know, are my other customers ordering okay? So this is really the purpose of why we're doing this, is to kind of quickly be able to see things. And bar charts, line graphs are, again, like you can do it very simply. So what I am going to do here is let's set up some data visualizations. All right, so here's what we're going to do. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy for now. There are better ways to do this, but I'm going to, at this point, just copy over, we'll call this April sales, okay, and May sales. And then for this one, we'll just put in the actual May sales here. Oh, weird. Okay. So that's interesting. Okay, so what I need to do here is I need to pull these customers because it looks like we have new customers. Okay. Okay, so this is tripping me up a little bit. The AI got a little creative in the data sets. So it actually added, and I'm going to flag them. Okay, it added some new customers. So good job, sales team. We added new customers. Let's see, Summit Forge is a new one, and then Titan and Vertex. So we've got 2 new customers. Yay, growth. Okay, so that's interesting, but it makes things a little bit harder for us here, so we have to account for that. Okay, so now everything lines up pretty good. So what we're going to do actually is I'm going to copy these over, and then we're just going to say 0 because we didn't have any sales the prior month. Okay, so now we've got this set up, and I'm just actually now going to drop these over here. Okay, so now we're good. Okay, and we'll remove that formatting. Okay, so so what I would do, I just copy pasted now for speed, but what I would do for more of a long-term solution is I typically build out these kind of summary tables on my summary sheet, but instead of actually copy pasting, what I would do is I would reference. So for this one, I would say, like, you know, April Acme equals, I'd go to my April tab, I'd find Acme, and then I'd go there. Okay, boom. So now if you look at the thing, whatever this is, the input box at the top here, you'll notice that at these ones it's numbers, but now if you notice this, look, it's actually going to that sheet and pulling the value from that cell. Now, why that's actually really powerful is because year over year, like when you start fresh the next year, your data will get wiped clean, but the table will automatically update if you do it this way. So like for next year in January, all the, like when you go, you'll have to update your references, but they'll all go to, back to 0. And then as you're filling in your new April, your new May for the next year, this table will begin to auto-populate. So that can make your life a little bit easier. And once you have it in there already, the nice thing is you can just copy paste it, and it will it'll carry over the formulas. The only thing we have to be careful is that we have to do this because of the shift with new customers. So this is still 0. We can't have there's no value for it, so we have to adjust for that. But then this one, again, for May, what we could do is say equals, go to May, find Acme, and now it is pulling that value. And then again, you could just drag that down. So you'll see N2, N3, N4, N5, and 6. So now it's pulling from each of those rows in that individual thing. So that whenever you can set up these kind of automated things, like it's better to do that because, again, it updates by itself. Okay, and now the really nice thing is like when you put in your data visualizations, like now we can put in a chart, and we're linking the chart to this data, which is linking to the actual inputs. Okay, so as I was just talking about, this table can update itself now because these numbers, like if I change this to like 20,000, okay, guess what just happened? This updated automatically. And your visualization will update automatically, okay? Because everything's referencing everything else as correctly. It's a bit tricky to set up, but once you have it, this is really where, this is what I talk about in my book. This is what I'm talking about in this playbook. Once you set these things up, you can work really fast with just these basic things within Excel. Okay, so let's set this up, and then we can we'll look at it in even more detail. So, okay, we're going to select data. This is going to be value that. Okay, and this is going to be value that. Okay, now this needs to be that. Let's see what that does. Yep, okay. Now, though, what we will need to do is add be this will be that. Okay, so notice what I'm doing here again is I'm not typing in manually. I'm referencing the actual cell, okay, and then I'm referencing the actual cells again, so that way again, if anything changes, the table will update because I didn't manually type anything in. Okay, so it's a little bit messy. Let's change this real quick. I want this. Okay, so this is not a great way to do it, but at least it's an example showing what can be done. When you've got this many customers, this is probably not a great way to do it because it's very confusing. You've got to try to match all the individual colors. So what would probably be better is if you actually just pulled the summary, your kind of summary sales by month and tracked that. And then what I would do is I'd probably set up individual charts, maybe for just my biggest customers to track those ones over time. You could do like, your annual sales here. Or you could just look at total sales per month. So basically just add up everything per month and then put that in and track that. So, we can, like what you could do here. is I would change this macro to like add in a total sales here at the end. Because again, we want this to be automatic. We don't want to be typing in manually. So going forward, I'd put in a total sales here and then pull that value up front here. Now this will work. Okay, so what I would do is I would do this, and obviously that's going to look much cleaner. So you see, this is a good way to track your accounts month by month. Here's what I'll do is I'll just copy paste it, and then I'm going to strip out everything, and I'm going to put in we're going to do one, tracking nice and neat. Let's make sure that's right. Okay. So there we go. And it's only 2 months, so it's not going to look great, but this is a cleaner way to do it, and it's actually extremely useful because what you can start to do here now that it is so clean, like this, you can change this to be 2026 sales, okay? So then next year, do it again, and it'll be 2027, so that'll be a new line. And what happens over time is that like you see these lines, and they alter a little bit month over month, but the general pattern should be relatively the same as what you'll probably typically see. Is that there'll be like you'll start to see these patterns in buying year over year, and that's what something like this is really good at. And you can take that and directly create strategies around that, and we'll talk about that in a second here. But real quick, what I want to do one more thing, and then we can get into the strategies. So what I want to do is and again, I would code this, but for now we're gonna manually do it. Okay, so what I'm doing here, and then this is going to be that divided by the total. And we want the total to always be the same. Okay, so, and then it should add up to 100 or 1. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I think we're at a good point where we can start to talk about strategy with this stuff. I've talked a little bit about it before. I'll just pick up with the seasonality stuff. You can use this in a ton of ways. Once you start to see if there's seasonality in your business, meaning that there are certain months per year that you do more sales, like consistently year over year than others, this is what should be informing your purchasing group. Okay, so and this is why we did all the mapping before, and why we mapped across the whole company from input to output. Okay, because even though let's just say sales data, I just found something that's incredibly useful to the purchasing team. Okay, because now I can say with certainty with data, like, hey, April's a big month for us. Like January, you better be ordering, and you better be ordering in bulk. Get our prices, order more in January, and we'll move them in April. Because the last 3 years worth of data says our sales are always 20% higher in April. Okay, versus, hey, it's maybe the end of the year and sales are dropping off a bit. So don't order more later in the year, because that's just going to bloat our inventory and make our free cash flow look, and blow up our working capital. So these are the kind of things that'll start to become apparent with you that may not even have to do with your area directly. They do, but you can start to have better conversations across the whole company. And the other thing that I want to do in regards to strategy is just sales specific. So if I'm a sales manager, I always love to do this, is take your customers now and add up the sales, per year, and then find out what percentage of sales each customer contributes. Okay, so what I did was I took the total sales, take the individual sales for that customer, divide it by the total sales for everybody, and that Acme did 9.18% of the total sales. Okay, this is really powerful. Because if you'll notice, and this is a made-up data set, so it's not going to be true. Find in the real world is a strong Pareto rule, an 80-20 rule. 20% of your customers are going to be contributing 80% of your revenue, or something very close to that. And why that is, it's kind of a universal rule that applies to a lot of things. But if you dig into it, typically what happens is you've got a range of customers, right? Okay, it's like some are going to be an excellent fit, and they're going to order more, they're going to pay you more, and you're just going to do more business with them. You're going to have others that are not a great fit. Okay, so what ends up happening is you get kind of this concentration of a few customers that do a lot of really good business with you, and then you're going to have a whole lot more that do much less business with you, like maybe even a one-time customer, things like that. Okay, now why this is important is because this is exactly what you're going to use to improve your go-to-market. Okay, you don't have to guess anymore. You can look exactly at, like, I know, I'm just going to highlight them green. Acme, okay, Atlas, Forge. You can just start going down the list. And what I do is, like, I'll run another just quick, like, add these up. Okay. Now I'm at 36% of sales. So let's do a little bit more here. Let's include Horizon and Precision Parts. Okay, so we're going to do Horizon and we're going to do Precision Parts. I messed it up. Okay, now we're at 50% of sales. Okay, so, and how many, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 customers of the 6. Okay, so like six of the 14 customers. So 43%. So that 43% of your customers are accounting for 50% of your business. So again, this is a little bit skewed here. It's not realistic, I would say, because typically you'll have much more of a spread. But this is exactly the process I use. And what you would find is that typically you'd have about 20% of your customers that are generating 80% of your sales. Okay, and let me run through how I got that again. So first of all, you start per account. You add up their sales a yearly. We're doing yearly here, annualized. Okay, so take the yearly sales of each customer and divide it by the total sales for that year. Okay, that's going to give you a percentage of sales, total sales for that customer. Okay, and then look at each of those and start to sort them. You might want to sort them highest to lowest, and start going down the list from the top, and say, okay, this one, Acme, Atlas. Look at all your big hitters here. Forge, the ones that account for the most percentage of your total sales. And what you'll find is then what you do is you count up the number of customers, okay, and divide it by your total customer list. So typically when I get to about 80% of my total sales, so I'll go down this list and add up these percentages of total sales until I get to about 80% of it, okay? And then count those customers, find how many that are, divide it by your total customer list, and it will come out to something close to 20% of your total customer list, or 10%, 30%, whatever it might be. But you're going to find something like that. You're going to find that 20% of your customers are doing 80% of your business, or something close to it. That's called the Pareto rule. And why that's important is this, and this directly pertains to strategy and things like go-to-market. What you should do strategy-wise, is from a sales perspective, is, okay, let's look at what is making these 20% customers purchase more from us. Like, why are they such a good fit? And you can start digging into company size, location. You can go in now, okay, and look month by month. This is another great thing to do. Like, look at what are they ordering? Which parts are they ordering? What part numbers are they ordering? Okay, this is all really valuable information for sales, marketing, you name it. I mean, I showed in the last video, you can pull in procurement data as well and add that in here and say, what's our margin? What's our highest margin product? Are they ordering high margin products? Are other customers not ordering high margin products? The one thing, this is a bit of an aside, but I'll mention it because I just thought of it. If you add margin in here, so you've got the cost, the landed cost, and you can look at things like gross margin, it's a great thing to do from a sales perspective because you can actually compare customer to customer on the same parts and see which customers is generating what margin. Okay, make sure it makes sense, especially if you've got contracts. If a customer is supposed to be ordering a certain amount of volume to get a certain amount of price break, okay, make sure that like a customer ordering less isn't getting a better deal. Like that doesn't make sense. That's not how it should work. The customers that are ordering more from you should be the ones getting the discounts. So you can go through now and check margins on each customer and say, and look at volume too. You got quantity here. You can look directly at volume and say, why is this customer getting a lower margin? They're not ordering as much as this other customer who's a really good customer of ours. We need to target that and find a way to adjust their pricing because their volume isn't in line. So those are a couple of really good things I like to do in regards to strategy and go to market. But let's just look at a couple of things here. So like let's say because we've linked everything, the charts will update automatically, and that's what I want to show here. So let's say, right now, here's what I'll do is I'll just copy this up so it's easier to see. But right now, total sales, okay, so like let's just say that these numbers all change. Let's say in May, like Acme had an amazing year. And let's say that Apex had an amazing month, excuse me. So let's say those guys had really great months. Now, if you go back and look, everything automatically updated, okay? Acme, Apex updated here on the front, on the summary. And because the chart was linked to these cells, the chart automatically updated too. So this is great if you're in meetings or if you want to run sensitivity analysis. I don't want you to focus so much on this being sales right now. I'm talking more generally about this process of linking things, linking data, okay? This is really great if you want to do things like sensitivity analysis. So if you want to change numbers, do what if scenarios, okay? Lock in on specific part numbers even. If you want to say, what if this part number goes away? What if we add in this? If you've got this linked in the right way, you can very quickly see how that impacts things, okay? And you can even go back and look at historical data. Just make sure you save the data so you're not overwriting it, okay? You don't want to overwrite your historical data, but if you save a copy and start playing with it, you can very quickly see these things. Or like look at what a potential change would have done for you last year. And that can help you project forward to say like, well, we know our customers. We've been doing this for 5 years. Okay, we've got the data that shows exactly how they behave. And now we want to make this change. Go back historically, do that in this file, and everything will update. And you'll be able to see very clearly, what kind of an impact is that going to have. And this is excellent if you're in executive meetings, okay? Because this type of stuff happens all the time. What will happen is you'll sit down and start having a discussion and you'll start presenting whatever it might be. Maybe you've got a strategy or a change that you want to make or whatever it might be, okay? And you're going to start getting all kinds of questions and new perspectives and information that you had even existed, okay? If you've done this right, you can plug a lot of that directly in here during the meeting. And let me tell you the impact that has. You'll be loved because you don't have to leave the room. Like if you're putting together a projection or like let's say you're in a meeting and the marketing lead speaks up and says, well, everything's looking really good for May. We could potentially bring in 20% new business or something like that, So all of a sudden you can come into May, add in a new light item or just change one of your existing, like maybe they're like, Acme's going to come through with, a new contract. Okay, boom, change that. Everything automatically updates live. And you could do this across, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as you've followed these steps. If you're working in procurement or accounting or whatever it might be, you can have these discussions live in the meeting. And that makes things much better because you can leave the room with the right strategy. Okay, you've done kind of a sensitivity analysis live in the meeting and looked exactly. The executives can see how things could potentially change, and then they can essentially green light, your overall strategy because they've seen the sensitivity analysis. We know the likelihood of things happening. Everyone's given their direct input, and we've seen it in the meeting, the potential outcomes. Okay, that makes it much easier for them to sign off on what you want to do, or to say, well, this is what we need, that, watch for this as we go forward. Everyone's just going to be on the same page, and it can all happen much faster. What kills momentum is when you have to say, I'm sorry, I'll have to get back to you. Like I've got to go check, because that executives won't even remember what you talked about sometimes. I mean, I'm just being honest here. And it's not their fault. Like, they're busy. Everybody's busy. Getting executives in a room and with full attention can be very challenging. Okay. And when you have to say, I'm sorry, but I got to go do more work on this, that can set you back months, actually. Like, it can crush you because you got to go back and get the data. You got to update everything. You got to get on everybody's schedule again. You got to hope that they're in a good mood now. Like, all this stuff plays into it. In the room, have tools like this set up ready to go so that you can play with things live. And you can do it very simply, like I showed you here, with tools just like Excel, and just by using this methodology that I've taught here. So this is really what I want to kind of emphasize and showcase with how I use all of this stuff, the foundation. And speaking of foundation, like, once you get your idea, you've looked at the data, you've seen the possibilities, okay, you've done some sensitivity analysis, you've done some what-if scenarios. Now you can go back to your process mapping that we did, okay? You can look at all of that, and now you know exactly where to focus. Like, let's say you're like, well, in order to do what we want to do, we need to focus on, this product. And another thing I like to do with this is, add up quantities, do an 80-20 analysis on your products, okay? See which products are contributing to the most amount of sales that you're making. That's great for R&D and engineering, okay? So, like, this data will also tell you what's moving, like, what do customers like? And then you can use that and go into the field and have discussions about that with customers, have technical discussions, focus on product pipeline for those products, okay? Because that's what's moving the market. So you can start to focus, versus you can say, like, oh my gosh, we spent $150,000 on this product last year in engineering, and it only sold like, a couple of dozen of them. These are the things that you'll start to find out very quickly, and it's going to change how you do strategy. It's going to improve your numbers incredibly quickly, okay? And that's really what I'm trying to convey here across the board. But again, by having the mapping and the foundation and understanding of what we did before, you know exactly where to focus, okay? Because then you can dig into why it's succeeding or why it's not succeeding. You can look at your process. If it is succeeding, you can look at your process and say, how can we make it even better? Okay, how can I allocate more resources to it? And if I allocate more resources to it, can it even improve the value? If we improve the value, we can increase the price, or maybe we bring a new product offering to the market in these areas with these customers, okay? So I hope you're starting to see that this process is extremely powerful and yet very simple. Once you learn a couple of these things, the possibilities really open up before you, okay? So that's what I'm really trying to convey here. With that, I think I'll end it. If you have more questions or want to follow up, jasonunlock.com is certainly where you can find me. If you haven't yet, go there, download the Executive Playbook. Also, if you're interested in more of this methodology, my book, Business Operations Unlocked, is a deep dive into it. It describes a full 7-step process that I use to do even more with this. Okay, so it talks about things like physical processes. If you're in manufacturing, how you can incorporate sensors and pull data and do things in Excel like we're doing here so that you can track physical processes. It talks about your IT structure and how you need to be set up these days to manage all of this data. Okay, because that's something that people come across as like, how do I even get access to the data? I'm in accounting, but our IT team doesn't allow people in accounting to have access to data. Like, these are some of the things that are going to start to slow down your growth, because all of a sudden, especially in this day of AI, everyone's going to have these skills to do this stuff. And if you don't have the right data structure and IT teams set up to handle that, you're very quickly going to run into walls, and it's going to crush any growth potential that you have. Okay, so you got to do it safely, and you got to make it available to your team so that they can do it, but also not introduce risk, or at least manage the risk. Okay, so that's very important, and I go into a lot more in the book, Business Operations Unlocked. So check that out as well if you haven't already. So that's where I'm going to end it here. Again, if you need more help, if you want to talk about working with me directly, jasonunlock.com is where you can find that. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.